Well, good afternoon, everyone. For those of you that don't know, to my right we have Jeff Loader, and to my left we have Walter Parsons, and they have joined me at the table today. They've been key players in getting us where we are today. And so, but I do want to acknowledge, we have Jeff and Walter here, but there's been a huge effort that went into this over the last number of years now with our negotiating team. They've worked very hard. It's getting us to where we are today, representing what is really Newfoundland and Labrador's interests at the national bargaining table. And as you know, that our remarks today are actually coinciding with what's happening in Toronto at this point, and Minister Mitchell is there joining ministers across Canada. So today's announcement is really a culmination of many conversations that we've had with the negotiating teams, ministers of trade, and certainly something that's been discussed at the Premier's table for a few months now. What we see here collectively, we saw the value of what has been creating a new agreement to guide trade across Canada for Canadians and businesses. Really, it's replacing or modernizing an agreement, I guess, that's been around now for some 20 years, that being the Agreement on Internal Trade. So this new agreement achieves reducing trade barriers. It opens up new markets for businesses, increases choices for consumers, and important for Newfoundland and Labrador, it creates opportunities for economic growth and diversification. The benefits are aligned with our government's commitment to creating an environment for business growth and job creation. We know that as a province we need to reduce our reliance on natural resource commodities and support a more sustainable, diversified business community. We also know that trade is critical for economic growth and diversification. The trade agreement supports our objectives as it covers all aspects of economic activity in Canada and all sectors, creating real benefits for our business community. Newfoundland and Labrador, our businesses across all sectors, are now have the ability to have a fair and transparent access to a vast majority of procurement undertaken by governments across our country. We've been able to successfully secure procurement exceptions to ensure that our business community can capitalize on the opportunities associated with major projects in our province. We have also been able to protect and carve out key economic policies such as the Atlantic Accord and minimum processing requirements. Quite simply, we've been able to negotiate the right balance between assuring our business community can take advantage of opportunities within this province, but importantly, to gain access to new market opportunities. And we see many representatives in this room today that would understand that once you get the ability to move into other provinces in a fair and reduce barriers in a fair way and reduce barriers, it means opportunities to do more business. So nationally, there's also an emphasis on reducing regulatory barriers that can hinder business growth. This issue is regularly discussed at First Ministers' meetings and in the individual conversations that I would have with other premiers, and we all agree that we had to do better. I would also say that the 4 Atlantic provinces, with the 4 premiers that we meet quite regularly, and this is an important aspect of the Atlantic growth strategy as well. So in some ways, we are more advanced and ahead of where other parts of the country would be on reducing trade barriers. So to ease the regulatory burden on businesses, governments will work together with businesses to determine what burdens need to be tackled and what the priority areas that need to be addressed first. And examples of these barriers that we will focus on would include things like certification of regulations around food, but also the regulations around the construction industry. So in the past, we've had governments, we've had businesses, we've had residents. We all have recognized the tremendous value in bringing Newfoundland and Labrador produced electricity to other provinces. So I'm very pleased to say that through the new Canadian Free Trade Agreement, we have taken an important step in developing the basis for that to occur. The creation of a regulatory framework governing electricity transmission provides specific rules and builds on the principles of open access and a non-discrimination that were outlined in the Canadian Energy Strategy. So in addition to the development of these new rules, the government of Newfoundland and Labrador was asked by other provinces and the federal government to engage with Quebec to discuss electricity transmission. Now, I've always said that I would be open to exploring opportunities that would benefit our province. It's how we pay for social programs, it's how we pay for infrastructure. So if there's an opportunity for Newfoundland and Labrador to explore those opportunities with any province, including Quebec, well, then we're willing to be at that table. So being open to a discussion with the government of Quebec opens the door to maximizing our natural resources and bringing new wealth to Newfoundland and Labrador. I think it's fair to point out that Quebec, being the only province that we share a land border with, but it's also our largest trading province. So I appreciate the recognition of other Canadian premiers and the Prime Minister that the issue of electricity transmission is important to Canada's economic development and demonstrates our shared commitment to the development of clean, green energy. So after a 24-month period, the government of Newfoundland and Labrador will ultimately decide whether the new electricity rules negotiated under this agreement will come into force. And if you think about it, if you think about a framework that happens today, that exists today, is that Quebec sells electricity into the U.S. under a regulatory framework. So essentially what we're doing is we're bringing similar rules across Canada. So this is just not Newfoundland and Labrador and Quebec. This is really across Canada, but could impact Newfoundland and Labrador with Quebec. So it's our role now to put those rules in place. But at that time, I think it's fair to point out, too, that parties will have the opportunity to take exception to those rules. So not only have we accomplished the objective of developing a regulatory framework to govern electricity transmission in Canada, but we have positioned our province, Newfoundland and Labrador, at the center of that conversation with the support of all jurisdictions. I think that's key here is when you think about the other provinces that have been involved in this, including the federal government. So these rules mirror what we see in other provinces. They must follow what we see then, similar to what we see with the flow of electricity into the U.S. These are the rules that Newfoundland and Labrador will live up to and that all provinces should live up to. So ladies and gentlemen, through the Canadian Free Trade Agreement, Newfoundland and Labrador, in my view, has never been positioned in a better position to maximize the full potential of its energy resources and also the opportunities now for local businesses outside of the ones working in the electricity industry, but businesses of all sorts are in a greater position now to be successful on the national stage.